What is going on, everybody? Well, I'm back today to talk about another documentary series. After watching the Keep Sweet, Pray, and Obey documentary series, I had an itch to watch some more documentary films. And the one I'm talking about today, if you can't see, I have my Midsummer shirt on, is because I wanted to talk about cults. And the cult I'm going to be talking about today is a cult you may be familiar with. And that is the Heaven's Gate cult. And there's a documentary streaming right now that came out, I believe, in 2020 that is about the Heaven's Gate cult. It was a 3-part documentary series, and I'm going to be discussing it today, and that is Heaven's Gate, the Cult of Cults. Heaven's Gate, the Cult of Cults is directed by J. Clay Tweel. What started in 1975 with the disappearance of 20 people from a small town in Oregon ended in 1997 with the largest suicide on U.S. soil and changed the face of modern New Age religion forever. This 4-part docuseries uses never-before-seen footage and first-person accounts to explore the infamous UFO cult that shocked the nation with their out-of-this-world beliefs. Honestly, I am fascinated with the idea of cults. I think it's super interesting because a lot of times when you research cults, people think that cults are able to bring in people that are highly uneducated or that will just blindly follow anything that anyone says. And that's not always the case, and that's especially not the case with the Heaven's Gate cult, where a lot of these people were incredibly intellectual individuals that had really high-paying jobs and that were willing to give up everything in their life to blindly go and follow these two people. So if you're unfamiliar with Heaven's Gate is a cult ran by this man and woman who went by the names T and Doe and Bo and Peep and about 1 million different names. And that's obviously not their given names, but they would come into these cities and they would tell people they were essentially chosen people by this alien group who had come to Earth. They were living in earthly vessels. The bodies that they were in were earthly vessels, and that this alien spaceship was going to come down and take them to God. And essentially you were prepping yourself to go in this spaceship and meet God. And this started in the 1970s, and this cult ran from the 1970s all the way through the early 90s until they committed a mass suicide with 39 people, which I think to this day is still the largest mass suicide in the United States of America. And so what the documentary explores is the formation of the cult. It's interviews with some of the former members of the cult and kind of gives you the background as to why a lot of these people joined, where their mindset is at. You get some people that still believe in this stuff even after they've left the cult. You get people who just think it's a crock of shit now and that they were in a place in their life where they just wanted to be accepted and belong somewhere. And I think that it's really fascinating because more than anything, I mean, getting information into why these things happen is just fascinating, and especially in the time capsule as to when these types of things happen. But I also think that it looks at mental health through a really unique lens, because I feel like a lot of the reasons why people join these cults can be attributed to problems with people's mental health, where you look at acceptance and belonging and sense for a greater purpose, and you get these people who are highly educated individuals that get great jobs that supposedly from the outside perspective, they should be thriving. They should be really happy with where they're at, and they're not. And that's because that they want something more than what they're given. And it opens up a larger conversation to the idea of the American dream, right? And that once you get to a point where you're married and you have a 9-to-5 job and you've succeeded in those areas, that you should somehow be complacent and that you should somehow be okay with that and not look for something more. And I think it's really interesting to see these people who, even when you see something as ridiculous as these two people who are coming into town and saying we've been sent here by this alien group and we're going to take you to see God, and that the body that you're in isn't the body that you're destined for, and that the life that you're living isn't the life that you're destined for. And if you join us and follow all of our little ritualistic things, you won't have to suffer and live this human existence. You can be a part of something bigger. And the draw and the allure to that to so many people, to me, is absolutely fascinating. And I think what's most interesting about the Heaven's Gate cult compared to a lot of the other cults that I've watched documentaries and studied on in my life is that I believe that at least Doe, the male leader in this, wholeheartedly believed through the entire time that he was doing this that what he was practicing was completely real, and that what was happening was completely real. Because in a lot of these cults, you see these men, like for instance, you see another thing I've been studying a lot recently is the stuff that happened in Waco with that cult. David Koresh, the leader of the cult in Waco that was a member of that group, he was in his position of power and acted like he was the second coming of Christ because he was able to get any woman that he wanted. He got notoriety. He was literally treated as a Messiah character. And that's a reoccurring theme through a lot of these different cults that you see, is because they put themselves in positions of power, they get things that they want. This guy, like, there wasn't really any leadership structure other than like, hey, if you don't follow this group of rules, you're not going to get into the alien ship. But it wasn't like a benefit to those people for you not to follow those rules. And a lot of people that got to a point where they were just like, hey, we want to leave, they just let them go. There wasn't any really like resistance to it. It was like, okay, go do whatever you want. And I think that's really fascinating, is that they created this collective mentality of like, we're going to get on this ship and go. And the fact that they did it for so many years and that people would leave and come back. And I think to me, it's all really that idea of acceptance, right? Everybody is looking for some form of acceptance. And I think this documentary does a really good job at giving you that insight into why certain people chose to be a part of this, with some really interesting information attached. It does have some pacing problems. I feel like a lot of these parted documentaries spend a little bit too much time kind of circling around and saying the same thing over and over again. But I think this has enough really interesting information that if you're looking at, if you're interested in cults, especially Heaven's Gate, which is very different than a lot of the other cult stuff that I've ever researched into, I think you'll get something out of this. And it's streaming on HBO Max right now. It was a really interesting documentary that I got a lot out of, despite it being repetitive in moments. I think that you'll be able to pull something out of this and find it really interesting. So have you seen Heaven's Gate, the Cult of Cults? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I thought this was a really interesting documentary, and although I don't think the pacing was perfect and some of the episodes felt like it had a little bit of filler, I still found the information at its core really interesting, and I find the whole background behind Heaven's Gate to be really fascinating. As always, if you like the video and subscribe to the channel, it helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.